Welcome to episode 1.2 of How to Argue Like a Decent Human Being. In this series, you will learn how to present and evaluate arguments, and also learn some key concepts from logic. This is a supplementary episode to episode 1. In episode 1, you learned what an argument is, and I also promised that I would create a separate video to explain the differences between statements and some related terms. The differences can be quite subtle, and not everyone agrees on the precise definitions of these terms. So should you have any suggestions or corrections that you believe may help improve my definitions, please leave a comment below. Let's start with utterances. An utterance is any meaningful sequence of sounds that come out of a speaker's mouth. Utterances have several defining characteristics. First, an utterance must be spoken rather than written. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is not an utterance, but what you're hearing is. Second, an utterance can be of any length. This means that an utterance can even be a single word, like oh. Third, utterances are demarcated by a pause. The exact duration of this pause can be arbitrary. So one person may maintain that if a person remains silent for half a second, then that signals the end of an utterance, whereas another person may set the threshold to 0.6 seconds, for example. Fourth, an utterance need not be complete or well-formed grammatically, meaning that an utterance can contain errors, false starts, repetitions, or fillers. For instance, I was a is an utterance. Finally, a pure noise does not qualify as an utterance. In other words, an utterance has to make some kind of sense in a given language. For example, the sound of me chewing some food does indeed come out of my mouth, but this noise doesn't convey any meaning in English, so it's not an utterance of English. However, you must be cognizant of onomatopoeia, or a class of phrases for imitating non-speech sounds. For instance, Japanese has a few onomatopoeic words for the sound of chewing, such as kucha-kucha and mogu-mogu. Since these are meaningful in Japanese, they are considered legitimate utterances in Japanese. To sum up, an utterance is any continuous, meaningful sequence of orally produced sounds. Since utterances can be messy, they do not belong to the discipline of logic. If you are interested in utterances, you ought to pursue linguistics instead. Next, what is a sentence? A sentence is a syntactic unit of language, consisting of a sequence of words, delimited by punctuation marks in writing. Sentences also have their own defining features. First, sentences are syntactic. By syntactic, I mean that sentences follow certain grammatical rules. And by grammatical rules, I do not mean the generative rules in the technical sense, whereby sentences are constructed. Rather, I mean the normative rules that help native speakers determine whether a given sentence is grammatical or acceptable. To put it simply, sentences can be correct or incorrect. For example, every competent speaker of English can tell that I, John, kick is unequivocally an incorrect sentence. Second, sentences can be categorized into 4 types. 1. Declarative sentences, which state facts or describe actions or states. 2. Interrogative sentences, which are basically questions. 3. Imperative sentences, which are commands. And 4. Exclamatory sentences, which can express a variety of emotions. Third, sentences are abstract. They are abstract in the sense that the same sentence or the same sentence type can be instantiated by multiple tokens. For instance, the sentence, I love dogs, can be written by 100 different individuals, and each of them can write it 10 times, resulting in 1000 tokens of the same sentence. In contrast, my first utterance of I love dogs is not identical to my second utterance of I love dogs, because they have slightly different acoustic properties. In summary, sentences are abstract grammatical units of language that come in 4 different flavors. Sentences are integral to a variety of disciplines, but logicians tend to concern themselves only with one specific type of sentences, namely declarative sentences, because the other sentence types do not express truth or falsehood. For example, it doesn't make sense to say that "watch out" is true. This of course does not entail that all declarative sentences are determinately either true or false, but that's a topic for another future episode. Next, what is a statement? We have already laid a foundation for being able to provide a succinct answer to this question. Essentially, a statement is a declarative sentence. This means that many statements can be either true or false, and therefore that many statements can be subjected to logical analyses. As for statements that are not either true or false, or statements whose truth values are indeterminate, logicians can still study them, but doing so requires a non-classical logic that is not restricted to the binary truth values. But that's another topic that is outside the scope of this video, or even this series. Finally, what is a proposition? Well, out of the 4 terms that we are attempting to define in this video, proposition is by far the most contentious one. Firstly, one essential aspect of a proposition is that it can be true or false. This is why propositions are commonly referred to as truth bearers, or things that can hold truth values. For instance, the proposition, "I am a dog owner," can be either true or false, because the truth value of this particular proposition is contingent on who says it and when they say it. If I had said it when I was a child, it would have been a true proposition because I used to have 2 dogs, whereas if I say it now, it is a false proposition. This of course does not preclude the possibility that some propositions may be always true or false, and indeed, an infinite number of such propositions do exist. But the point remains that propositions have the potential to be true or false, at least in classical logic. Secondly, propositions typically appear in the form of declarative sentences, or statements if you prefer, but they may sometimes assume different appearances. The most prominent example would be mathematical equations. For example, the intimidating equation 1 + 1 = 2 is a proposition which happens to be always true. Thirdly, one and the same proposition can manifest in different forms. The above proposition 1 + 1 = 2 can be written as 1 + 1 = 2, or be converted into a declarative sentence. The sum of 1 and 1 is equal to 2. Its terms can even be moved around, as in 1 - 2 = -1. These expressions are all said to denote the same proposition. By extension, the Japanese sentence 1 + 1 は2, though written in a different language, expresses the same proposition as well. This is why some philosophers define a proposition as the meaning of a statement, rather than equating the proposition with the statement itself. Lastly, propositions can be asserted, believed, denied, and so forth. For example, the proposition, "There is a black dog in front of me," can be asserted by uttering it verbatim, or by prefixing it with the phrase "I assert that," as in, "I assert that there is a black dog in front of me." Similarly, you can express your belief in the proposition by saying, "I believe that there is a black dog in front of me," and you can also deny it by saying, "There isn't a black dog in front of me," or "It is not the case that there is a black dog in front of me." To recap, a proposition is something that can be true or false. As long as it can hold a truth value, it needn't be a declarative sentence. Multiple expressions can denote the same proposition. Propositions are what can be stated, believed, negated, and so on. Now, you might be thinking, what is the point of having all these virtually synonymous words? And I am inclined to agree with you. These terms are indeed interchangeable in many cases. Then, which one am I going to use in this series? I intend to stick to using statements in future episodes for 2 reasons. 1. Because statement is the least likely term to be misinterpreted by my viewers, who may or may not have seen this episode. And 2. It's the easiest word for me to pronounce. This is the end. See you in the next video.